He didn't ask me to leave the room. He didn't lower his voice or wait until I was gone, or have the basic decency to do it behind my back like most people do when they're about to destroy something that belongs to you. He sat across from a real estate agent at my kitchen table, in my house, with my coffee going cold beside his elbow, and he signed his name to a contract to sell it. While I sat right there, and when I looked up at him, when our eyes met across the table I had chosen, and the house I had bought, and the life I had built without a single dollar of his help, he smiled. Not apologetically, not nervously. Just smiled. The way men smile when they've already decided the outcome and are simply waiting for you to catch up. I never thought I'd be treated this way by my own father. But here's what I learned that afternoon at that kitchen table in Portland, Oregon. I was more prepared for him than he knew. But before we get into exactly what I did, and we are getting into every detail, take a moment to like and subscribe, only if this story hits somewhere real. And drop your city in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're watching this from. Let me take you back, all the way back to a house in rural Vermont where a little girl learned that her father's love was not unconditional. It was transactional. And the transaction always favored someone else. My parents, Gerald and Nancy Whitfield, raised 3 children in a farmhouse outside Burlington that always needed more work than it got. Dad ran a small property development business that had good years and bad years in roughly equal measure. Mom taught elementary school for 27 years with the patients she somehow never brought home with her. They were not a warm family. I want to be precise about that because this story requires precision. They were functional, organized, outwardly respectable in the way that small Vermont communities recognize and reward. Dad was on the town planning board for a decade. Mom sang in the church choir. From the outside, the Whitfields were exactly what they appeared to be. From the inside, there was a different architecture entirely. My brother Greg was the oldest. 36 now, built like my father, thinks like my father, has spent his entire adult life becoming my father in ways I'm not sure he's fully examined. My sister Pam was the youngest, gentle, conflict-averse, the family peacekeeper who kept peace by never choosing a side, which meant she always chose my father's by default. And then there was me, Laura, the middle one, the one who asked why when the answer was supposed to be obvious, the one who noticed things and made the mistake of saying so. My father, Gerald Whitfield, was not a cruel man in the way that word usually lands. He never hit us. He provided. He showed up to the things fathers are supposed to show up to. But there was a quality to his attention, a selectivity to it, that I understood long before I had language for it. Greg got his business advice, his mentorship, his pride displayed openly at dinner tables. Pam got his protection, his softness, the version of him that could occasionally be tender. I got his correction. Every achievement I brought home was met with an adjustment. Honor roll, but could you have done better? Scholarship to University of Vermont. I hope you're not planning on being one of those women who thinks a degree makes her better than her family. Promotion at 24, just make sure you're not neglecting the things that actually matter, Laura. He never said what those things were. He didn't need to. The implication was the point. I left Vermont at 22 and did not look back. Not with anger, with intention. I moved to Portland, Oregon because it was far enough, and because I'd been offered a position at an urban planning firm that made my heart rate change when I thought about it. I worked. I built. I promoted twice in 4 years, changed firms at 27 for a role that doubled my salary, and began saving with the focused discipline of someone who knows that financial independence is not just money. It's protection. At 29, I bought my house. A Victorian in northeast Portland, narrow and tall, with original hardwood floors and a kitchen that got morning light, and a backyard that I planted myself on weekends with my neighbor's dog supervising from the fence. I bought it alone, my name on the deed, my down payment from my savings account, my mortgage from my salary. My father was not consulted. My father was not informed until after closing. My father's response when I called to tell him was, "A house alone, Laura. Isn't that a bit much for one person?" I thanked him for the feedback and changed the subject. That house was mine in every possible sense of the word, and for 3 years it stayed that way. The trouble started the way trouble in families usually starts. Quietly, in the background, with someone else's problem becoming everyone else's emergency. Greg's property development venture, started with seed money from my father that I learned about only later, had not gone well. The details arrived to me in fragments through Pam, who delivered family information the way she delivered everything, gently, apologetically, as if the news were her fault for carrying it. Greg had debts, significant ones, the kind that have consequences attached. My father's solution, and my father always had a solution, that was the thing about him, he was never without a plan, only ever without your consent, was real estate. Specifically, he had decided that the Portland property market was the answer. Specifically, he had decided that my house in Portland was the answer. I didn't know any of this when he called in October to say he'd like to visit, that he hadn't seen my place properly, that it would be good to spend some time. My father had visited Portland exactly once in 3 years. He had stood in my living room and made 2 comments about the neighborhood and asked if I was seeing anyone. But I said yes, because I was Laura Whitfield and I still, even at 31, even after everything, answered yes when my father said he was coming. He arrived on a Thursday. Greg came with him. I noted this but said nothing. Greg had never visited Portland independently, and his presence had the feeling of someone brought along for a purpose that hadn't been announced yet. Thursday was fine. Dinner, conversation, my father asking questions about the house that I interpreted as interest and now understand as assessment. How long was the mortgage? What had the comparable sales been doing in the neighborhood? Whether I'd had anyone look at the foundation recently. Friday morning, I came downstairs in my own house to find a real estate agent sitting at my kitchen table. Her name was Donna. She had a laptop and a folder and the professional expression of someone who had been briefed on the situation and was hoping it wasn't as awkward as it felt. It was more awkward than it felt. My father was sitting across from her. Greg was standing at the kitchen counter with his coffee like a man trying to take up less space than his actual size. Laura, my father said, "Sit down. We need to talk about the house." If you have ever walked into a room and understood in 3 seconds that something had been arranged without you, drop a fire in the comments. That specific feeling of being the last person informed about your own life is one that doesn't need explanation. You either know it or you don't. I sat. My father explained it with the calm of a man who has rehearsed and found his reasoning sound. Greg was in difficulty. The Portland market was strong. The house would sell quickly and well. The equity would resolve Greg's situation, and my father would ensure I was, and this is the word he used, I have not forgotten it, comfortable while I sorted out alternative arrangements. Comfortable. He used the word comfortable about my own house, that he had no legal relationship to whatsoever. I looked at Donna, the real estate agent. She looked at her laptop. I looked at Greg. He looked at the counter. I looked at my father. And then he did it. He reached across the table, picked up the pen Donna had placed there, and signed his name to the listing agreement. In my house, at my table, without my signature, without my consent, without even the performance of asking. The room was completely silent. Then my father looked up at me and smiled. Faintly, patient, the smile of a man who has never genuinely considered that this moment might not go the way he's planned it. Now, he said, I know this is a lot to process, but sometimes family requires sacrifice, Laura. You've always had everything you needed. Your brother needs help. I looked at him across my kitchen table. After everything I've done for you, he said, and his voice was so calm, so reasonable, so entirely certain of its own authority. Is this really how you repay me? And I felt it, even at 31, even knowing what I knew about this man and this pattern and the way this particular sentence had been used on me since childhood. I felt the old pull, the familiar gravity of his disapproval. My mouth started forming the shape of an apology before my brain had approved the motion. He put his hand on my shoulder across the table. Gentle, heavy, both at once. "Good," he said softly, watching my face. "At least you finally know your place." Greg said nothing. Donna looked at her laptop. The family watched and nobody objected, and it was not the first time my father had chosen his version of events over mine. But it was the last. Because what my father did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had been waiting for something like this for 3 years. Not this specifically, but something. Because when you grow up with a man like Gerald Whitfield, you develop a particular instinct, a readiness. You learn to build your house on ground he can't reach, and then you learn to document everything, and then you learn, slowly, expensively, through one attorney consultation at 27 that changed the way I understood my own life. You learn exactly what your rights look like written down. I stood up from the table. I walked to the kitchen drawer, beside the refrigerator. I took out a folder. I placed it on the table in front of Donna, whose professional expression was now doing considerable work. "The deed to this property," I said, "is in my name exclusively. My father has no legal interest in it, no co-ownership, no power of attorney, and no authorization of any kind to enter into agreements regarding its sale." I looked at Donna directly. "Whatever he just signed is not worth the paper it's on. I'd recommend you speak with your broker before leaving this house today." Donna closed her laptop. Greg put down his coffee. My father's smile stayed on his face for approximately 4 more seconds. Then it did something I had never seen it do in 31 years. It faltered. "Laura," he started. "I'm not finished." My voice was completely level. I had not planned this speech. It was simply the truth arriving in the order it needed to. "You came into my home under false pretenses. You brought a real estate agent to my kitchen table without my knowledge or consent. You signed a document you had no authority to sign. And you did it in front of my brother, who said nothing, in front of a professional witness, and in front of me." I looked at him. My father, Gerald Whitfield, the man who had corrected every achievement of my life and called it love. "So I want to be very clear about what happens next. You are going to leave my house today. Greg is going to leave my house today. And you are both going to understand that I have documented this visit, this meeting, and that signature, and that if any listing appears for this property without my authorization, I will pursue every legal remedy available to me without hesitation or sentiment." The kitchen was silent in a different way than it had been before. Before, it was the silence of a room where one person had all the power. Now it was something else. My father opened his mouth. "After everything—" "Stop," I said. "That sentence doesn't work on me anymore. I need you to actually hear that. It stopped working. I don't know exactly when, but it's done." He closed his mouth. For the first time in my memory, Gerald Whitfield had nothing to redirect into. No decree, no reframe, no smile that reorganized the room in his favor. He looked old. That surprised me. Not frail, just suddenly, visibly, the age he actually was. Donna excused herself with the quiet efficiency of a professional who has decided that whatever she's being paid is not enough for this, and left through the front door without another word. Greg drove my father to their hotel. Nobody hugged goodbye. Nobody said they'd call. I stood at my front window and watched the rental car back out of my driveway, and I felt, not triumph, something quieter than triumph and more durable. The specific relief of a person who has finally stopped bracing. That night, I called my friend Renee. Renee, who had heard every version of every Whitfield family story over 10 years of friendship, and had the particular gift of knowing when to speak and when to simply be on the other end of the phone. I told her everything, start to finish, the real estate agent, the folder, my father's face when the smile faltered. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "How do you feel?" "Like I finally live here," I said. "Like it's actually mine now." She understood what I meant. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my back porch with the Portland evening doing what Portland evenings do in October. Cool and gray and completely indifferent to the drama of human families. And I let myself be still. My phone buzzed, Text from Pam. Dad called me. He's very upset. He said you embarrassed him in front of a professional. He said you've always had a problem with this family. Laura, I think you should call him. I put my phone face down on the porch railing. I looked at my backyard, the garden I'd planted, the fence with the neighbor's dog's nose print still on the lower slat from last Sunday. I picked the phone back up and typed, "I'll call when I'm ready, Pam, not before." I put it down again. I finished my wine. And then my doorbell rang. Not a knock, the bell, twice, the way someone rings a bell when they've been standing outside working up to it. I looked at the time, 9:47 at night. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. It wasn't my father. It wasn't Greg. It was a woman I had never seen before in my life, somewhere in her 50s, standing on my porch in the October dark, holding a manila envelope with both hands pressed against her chest like she was keeping it from escaping. She looked up at the peephole as if she knew exactly where it was, as if she'd been to this door before, as if she'd been planning to come for a long time. I stood on my side of the door with my hand on the latch, and something moved through me that I didn't have a name for yet. Because the woman on my porch looked, in the set of her jaw, and the particular way she held her shoulders, like someone I recognized without knowing why. She looked, in some arrangement of features I couldn't immediately explain, like she could be related to me. I opened the door. She looked at my face for a long moment. Then she said, "Is your father Gerald Whitfield?" The October air came in cold around her. "Yes," I said carefully. She nodded, just once, and held out the envelope. "Then you need to see what's in this," she said, "because what he did to your house today, it wasn't the first time he's done it, and you're not the first daughter he's done it to. Subscribe, because what's in that envelope, and who this woman is, that is a whole other story, and it's coming."